Well, welcome everybody to the Scott and Molly show today. Today is a snow day here in southwestern Virginia, which means that my wife and I are not taking care of our grandson Jasper, which means that I have a lot of time on my hands, which is a dangerous proposition because when I have time on my hands, I usually get into trouble or meddle into things that get me into trouble. So Molly has very graciously and bravely decided to join me here live on Substack in part to keep me out of trouble, but I'm also really excited to um, to share a little bit about Molly and the work that she does. Molly is a member of the Solopreneur Success Circle community. That's the paid subscriber community for the Solopreneur Success Stack, my publication. And Molly, your publication, if I remember correctly, is Creating Out Loud. Tell us a little bit about what you are up to on Substack, what your publication is all about, and who it's for, and what you're trying to help people accomplish.
Thank you, Scott. That's a great question. And it is thanks to Casey that I have a blog because I wanted to have a blog for years. And Casey von Neumann, did I say her name right?
Uh-huh.
She helped me have my first blog. And this is the blog that I started. And it was originally for my English language learning student. But now I'm thinking, I don't know. I don't know what it is, but I realized that if I write, then my students or the people I coach with English have something to read. And then I'm also I'm trying to show out loud what I'm doing, which I think is part of what speaking a foreign language is. That's part of my thing that I think we are when we're speaking out loud, we're creating out loud. We forget that. And I'd love to hear what you think about this because you're a performing artist, and I never I think there's an overlap with the performing arts and language learning, but we often don't connect the two, and we should. And I've had good experiences with education and music learning and bad, and
Mhm.
so, anyways, I've gone on a tangent.
Well, there's a couple of um, unique synchronicities that I think are worth highlighting. You and I both feature the idea of creativity in our primary branding. Yours is creating out loud, and my brand is creative on purpose. We both um, are engaged in work that doesn't necessarily um, make people instantly connect what we do with creativity, but um, the way that I think of it, and I think this does apply to your brand and your work, is the act of it's called the art of living, right? And so art is a creative enterprise. The art of living is a creative enterprise that you elevate to art through a discipline and commitment to a practice, and that I love what you shared about the out loud aspect because I frequently am encouraging members of our community and my clients to do their work out loud and in public. Like that's number one, the best way to clarify what you do and who it's for and the results or outcomes that you get people or the problems that you solve for them or the aspirations you help them achieve. And it's also a great way of creating brand marketing, whether that's just, organic posting uh, on a blog, to a Substack, to a YouTube channel, a podcast, a blog, what have you. Um, so I love that element of it. One of the fundamental principles of Be a Blessing marketing, which is the kind of marketing that the name I give the marketing that I do and that I teach is do your thing and let them watch. Play your game out loud and in public, and your people will find you is kind of the way I think about it. And creativity is the language, Spanish is the language, English is the language. These are all ways that I think this whole idea of out loud speaks to the idea of action clarifies. So I don't know if that addresses any of your questions or if there's any insights there that you want to grab a hold of and tug on.
Mhm. Absolutely. I'd love. I have a question for you. That just makes me now before because I could respond to that, but it makes me think. You've helped me think of a question that I'm. I think that part of the thing is about practice and performance
Mhm,
and how it relates to how I see it relating to to language learning is that we don't separate them into two categories. We the typical foreign language class, and some people come to me saying that this is what they think they need because this is what they've been given, is people are performing live and being corrected and being evaluated and mistake, 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 and having their mistakes pointed out. And then they start making more mistakes, and then they tell themselves a story about how their English or their Spanish isn't good enough because this teacher told them that they were making all these mistakes while they were performing live.
mhm,
And the same thing used to happen with me with my English because that was also how I was educated to, sort of perform, always be performing. And but where is the space for practice? And how do we, like, we know when we're playing a musical instrument, we do certain things, we need to slow down. Like there's certain things that we learn how to practice, right? And so but when we so I think people who've what I try to do, okay, I'm getting nervous and trying to say too many things, but I wonder what you if you know what I'm trying to say here. And you could say blogging, like you could connect this with creating out loud, with writing, for example. Like if I write and I have the courage, it takes a lot of courage to write and just put it out there. The benefit of that is that I'm not getting live feedback. It is a way for me to practice without the stakes are actually lower than if I were like doing what I'm doing right now, for example, which is live, which is a performance. So that we can practice with our writing, for example, or we can practice with and that we need those spaces because if we're messing up in performance, we probably just need to practice more. But we don't seem to talk about language learning in that way, or I haven't heard people. But
mhm.
that's my.
Well, it's your reflection reminds me of the all of the terrible experiences I had trying to learn spoken languages, foreign languages. One of my very first the very first language I learned to speak or to read outside of English was Latin, ancient Roman Latin, which I actually loved. I actually, when I first went to college, wanted to be a classicist. I wanted to be a classics major because I had a great Latin teacher. I loved Greek and Roman history, and um, the Iliad and the Odyssey were two favorite books. Marcus Aurelius's Meditations and Epictetus's Enchiridion were favorite books from a very early age, from like seventh grade. But in order to get my liberal arts degree, I also had to take a modern foreign language, and so I took French because I took a little bit in high school as well, and I hated it because it was all about just practicing, all like going into the audiovisual room and getting out tapes and listening to French being spoken and then saying things out loud and a lot of my experience was exactly what you said, like, just, being constantly reminded that I didn't have a great like, my accent sucked, my my articulation, my diction, and, subsequently, I never like, I did the bare minimum to pass and never even thought about it again. The core question that you're asking is there seems to be, is there a distinction between practice and performance? And, um, I would say it depends. Or maybe yes and. Um, One of the things I know from my time as a performing musician myself, but also teaching literally 1,000 students in this little town I live in to play the guitar and to perform, to share that out loud and in public on stages during recitals, was that um, if you if you cling too firmly and invest too much just in the practice element. You will keep practicing and never be ready to perform, and that is a shame, and that actually flies in the face of what music is for. Like, one of the things that I would tell students when I was onboarding them into my studio is, you know, I'm going to teach you how to play some of your favorite songs just as quickly as I can. And twice a year, you're going to get on a stage and you're going to perform those songs for family and friends because that's what music is for. Music is a language. Language is meant to be spoken, it's meant to be shared, it's meant to communicate and connect with other people. It's a collaborative enterprise. And the only way that you can learn the value of that and to be comfortable with that is to do it before you're ready. And you and I had that joking little moment before we got on. One of my famous lines to students before we performed a song at recital was, I'd say, "Are you ready?" And the only response that was allowed is, "Born ready." And that is that's the fundamental piece that I think answers your question. Is, like, left to our own devices due to human programming and the conditioning of institutionalized education and occupation, we're never going to feel ready, which means we're never going to stand up to be seen and speak up to be heard. Um, we have to be willing to stand up and to be seen and speak up to be heard when we are ready enough. And my first public on-stage performance as a guitarist occurred when I had 3 songs to share, and that was it. I got an encore, which meant I had to repeat one of the 3 songs I had already played because I only knew 3 songs. Um, that was a really instructive and important lesson to me because, I learned a lot from that experience, and the thing that I would encourage anybody to embrace if they're struggling with this idea of standing up to be seen, speaking up to be heard, doing what you do out loud and in public so that other people can learn about it, see it, become aware, pay attention to it. Um, is that you've been doing this from a very early age. None of us learned how to walk or talk or read or write by waiting until we were ready. We did it really poorly out loud and in public many, many times, very, very poorly, falling, failing, stumbling over words, being misunderstood or not understood. And over time, we honed our craft and became expert walkers, talkers, readers, writers. And if we had not stood up to be seen and spoken up to be heard before we were ready, that never would have happened. So there is that element. You talked a little bit about uh, Casey helping you find the courage to start your blog and to appear on this broadcast. I would be curious your process for accepting that invitation, but my guess is it didn't require the kind of courage that we usually associate with courage. Like, it's not the pulling out your sword and rushing into to the l- to the lines, charging at you, risking life and limb. I mean, courage most of the time, to put it in David White language, the famous poet, Welsh Irish poet. Um, you just have to show up half a shade braver than you did the moment before, and that's courage enough to get started.
Mm. And well, I was just thinking about you can pick the cool thing about now that makes it easier now is that you can pick your audience. This I learned with you and Casey, who I met through Seth Godin's workshops. And you and Casey led as coaches in those workshops, and you modeled for me how you and Casey modeled for me how to lead groups online to help people feel safe. And Seth did as well. And I had never experienced that online. I've experienced it in person, but I'd never experienced it online. And part of it was that I felt safe to be afraid. It was okay to be afraid. It was okay to be silent. It was okay to watch and see other people go first, and I wouldn't get called on. That knowing that I wouldn't get called on, that was huge. Because I used to always get called on because I always can think of something to say. So like, and I was an only child for 12 years. So and I get knowing anyway. So we all have our stuff from school, right? But that so it was like I saw you guys teaching and I trusted you. And then I also learned from Casey that I could pick my audience, who I would write to. And I tried to help some students do this and I see it working with them. Um, I could start with an anonymous blog. I would not share it with my parents. My parents have not been this has not been shared with them as well. And I can create those circles until I'm ready for them to find it. They're not, if they are like if they could find it if they tried hard enough, but they're in their 70s, they're not right. But keeping the people in who will support me, who will praise me, knowing that I need that I'm hard enough on myself, and that I don't need people who might point out the typos and so that I can make. But I think we sometimes forget that we can do that at this time. It's not like 20 years ago when even with things like yoga classes, I had this realization the other day. I'm afraid to teach yoga. Perhaps I'm afraid to teach yoga because I can't. What if I could pick the audience and not have it just be anybody off the street who came to my class and might think, well, she's not good because I'm not, because I need to get practice to get better, right? We can even we can invite three people that we carefully choose to a yoga class, and maybe that's how we get over the fear. And so then, like, this piece of choosing your audience, like performing from when we're kids. When I performed music for my parents, it was different than when they put me on a stage and said, you are the example of this teacher's student. Now,
Mhm.
no, show your stuff. Don't mess up. And I didn't want to be there, and I didn't want to be looked at, and I didn't, right? So these pieces, I feel like we have more wiggle room than we think, and we can use that to our advantage. And but to have spaces like yours, the space you hold with the and I stole, by the way, just to say, creative thing, I stole that from you. The creative on purpose, creative on purpose. The community, it is a place where you can show up scared and you can say that you're
Mhm.
afraid. And having those kind of spaces, is and you guys showed me that as coaches for Seth, and I had never experienced that online. So, and that's also part of what I want to do for my students, but many of them have never experienced that. And I think people are afraid to even put themselves in a Zoom room because so
I love the reflection. The thing that came immediately to my mind as you were talking, especially about your desire to teach yoga, but not feeling like you're far enough along to do that. I was a professional musician for about 20, no, not quite, maybe 10 or 15 years before I opened up my guitar studio, which I opened up in part because I wanted to spend less time on the road so that I could raise my sons and be home more, and homeschool and all that sort of thing. So I started my guitar studio because I was getting a lot of people asking me if I would give guitar lessons. And one of the things that really hung me up is I didn't know how to read music, and I couldn't therefore teach people out of a standard method book. And a lot of parents were interested, like they wanted to have some sort of text. They wanted to be able to measure, their kids' progress. Um, and so I literally taught myself to read music by taking my first handful of students and always being just a few pages ahead of them in the book that I was teaching out of. Um, and eventually, not only did I teach myself, musical notation and some basics of music theory, but I taught myself jazz harmony and jazz composition and jazz theory, and eventually like changed the kind of music that I played from um, you know blues, which is basically three chords and five notes, to playing my favorite jazz standards, which are very sophisticated and on a level of classical composition. So that it speaks to the what we were saying earlier. Like you just have to be you literally just have to be a few steps ahead of the people that you're working with or teaching, or just sharing with. And I don't think there's anything wrong with like letting people like that's to me, that's almost the definition of leadership. Like leaders are not the people that have all the answers and n- know the way, because if you're following someone that knows the way, it's probably not really even a place that's very interesting or worth exploring. But a leader is someone that stands up and says, I don't know exactly what's over there or how we're going to get there, but I think it's going to be really exciting. And I think we can do it if we do it together. And even if it doesn't all turn out perfectly, I'm pretty sure we won't die and we'll probably have a lot of fun. Like that to me, that's the ultimate kind of leadership. It was certainly the way I led from the bandstand because I was famous for like no set list, no scripted shtick or choreographed dance steps or like nothing. Like we're just going to go out there. We're going to see what the audience wants. We're going to do the best we can to give it to them, and I'll tell you what to do when it's time to do it, type of thing. And so every performance was this huge improvisational experience that was always really fun and often entertaining. And um, so, just a reflection, Molly, to you and to anybody else that's hesitant about like do I know enough? Am I ready enough? That sort of thing. Like, no matter, and to your point, like you get to choose your audience. Like, if you're going to teach yoga, well, don't teach it to yoga instructors. That's not going to be, that's not your audience, but teach it to people that, like are hesitant to start a yoga practice because they're afraid about not knowing enough and feeling self-conscious about the way they look. And so that's one of the things that about choosing your audience is you also get to build the container that you're going to um, host your communication, your exchanges, your connection in. And so, for me, a big part of creating my own spaces is I get to establish the container. I get to create a safe space that's safe enough for people to show up, but also um, with show up with curiosity, some personal efficacy, and self accountability to explore the edges and understanding of their abilities, and to explore their potential within that container, knowing that they're never really at risk, for any kind of unnecessary harm. I don't know if that
Mhm.
makes sense.
Absolutely. And if I just realized my battery's getting low. If I just suddenly, I have no idea how long it'll last. But I also, one of the things I thought of is if I show up as a teacher of English, which is something I also learned, like you, the grammar of English, I had to learn as my students knew more than me for, and they still do, um, about English grammar because we didn't learn it in school. I mean, I didn't. And but what if I show up? So one idea I had was to show up to my community and teach them yoga. They trust me and say, "Look, I don't know, I'm learning." But I think there's something good about that because it puts me in their shoes to be to, and I think that's something that's powerful about like creating out loud. This idea that if I that I need to do it too. I can't always just be in the place of the one who has the most confidence in the room at the thing that I should probably do something that makes me look could potentially is scary and I look like a fool. And so then I could use that. I haven't done this yet, but I did have this idea that I could, and they were all like, yeah, yeah. I mean, I threw it out there and people were like, yo, that'd be amazing. And it is something actually that people are hungry for. A lot of people have never tried a yoga class and they trust me and they know me and I could lead them. I'd be good enough, but I still haven't done it. So that's my I'm putting myself on the hook a bit, but
Yeah. Well, I love that. So there's like this whole idea of micro-stepping that we talk quite a bit about in our community. Just a quick shout out to Allison, Michael, Carolina, Vijaya. I hope I'm saying your name correctly. Great to have you all here. I love the idea. What you're sharing is basically this idea of micro-stepping, which I talk quite a bit about in the Close the Gap program and the Close the Gap book, which people can download for free from the Substack or from my website. Um,
I'm
the
here.
idea of micro-stepping is that you don't have to bet everything on black 36 and spin the roulette wheel, and it's an all or nothing um, endeavor with the odds really stacked against you. You can, like, the first micro step is saying, "Hey, I'm thinking about doing this thing," which you did, right? And people were like, "Yeah, that sounds amazing. We'd love to do that." Okay, idea validated. So let's just give it a try. Let's meet for a half hour on Zoom and do a few poses or talk about, what this might look like or whatever. Like, you just step by step by step by step. And that's just to circle back to early in the conversation. To me, that's a really fantastic way of not just validating an idea and creating a sustainable project or sustainable enterprise, but it's a way of gaining clarity and like gaining clarity about what you're going to do and how you're going to do it, but also the confidence that you can do it, and you're earning trust and permission and a deeper level of connection along the way that only emboldens you and strengthens your ability to continue to iterate and improve that thing into whatever it's meant to be or whatever, direction that you want to take it.
Totally, like what you and Casey were talking about with the one person. Like at least there was a person. There was only one person in the audience sometimes, but at least they were clapping, and and that for those people, it's a pretty special service. Actually, they're getting a private concert, right? That it's not worse; it's actually better, or could be. Yeah, if you tell the yeah, you weave it into the make it work.
Absolutely. I'm curious, Molly, if you're willing to share. I know a little bit about your backstory. You and I grew up in a similar neighborhood at different points in time. You're currently living in Argentina, and you are currently transitioning from being a foreign language teacher into whatever it is that you're going to be doing next. I'm just curious, I'm guessing a little 9-year-old Molly didn't wake up one day and say, "You know what I'm going to do when I grow up? I'm going to move to a foreign country and teach people how to speak English." I'm just curious, if in as much detail as you like or feel comfortable with, like, how did you come to be doing what you're doing?
Such a good question. No, the one thing I knew as a 9-year-old was that I would never be a teacher. My parents were teachers, and I was like, I don't know what I'm going to be, but I know I'm not going to be a teacher. I was sure I wasn't going to be a teacher. My parents are both teachers. I grew up in Boston, city full of teachers. Everybody was a teacher. I don't know. And yeah, I don't know. I After college, I was a bit burnt out, and I moved to Spain. I was a bit burnt out. I was very burnt out. Um, and I moved to Spain, and the best thing for me to do there was to teach English. I was working in hostels under the table, things like that. And then it was clear that teaching English was going to be the thing that made sense. But then through the and I got trained to be a teacher a year, no, not a year, a month long certification program. They gave me like permission to get a job as an English teacher to adults in Spain, um, which is where I learned how to help students learn. But I learned to teach teaching, um, and I think now I realize that that was 20 years ago almost. So now I
Mm,
realize not having gone to school was a blessing. Not having gone to teaching school was a blessing, and I always loved English. So that so in fact, loving English, loving writing, and now was enough. And then I learned to, I think I learned to teach, and doing one-to-one teaching is and teaching adults. So I'm only teaching people who want to learn, and I'm only teaching adults. But though I'm starting to think about teaching kids, I don't know. I got so it's changing, but I love now there are different ways to now it's weird. Now I'm able to teach people the way I learned English, which I had some great English instruction. I had terrible Spanish instruction, but I had great English instruction. So now with the internet, I'm able to there the tools exist to help people learn in a way that works for them. And I enjoyed helping people express themselves in English, which was something that I got to do that was part of why I liked life. And it helped make life okay, right? It was a so now I have the freedom to work for myself and I can do that. I don't have to work for an academy anymore that tells me that I need to follow this book and we need to talk about these things. Now people can blog in their classes. They can make YouTube videos. They can be creative and use their English to be creative and work through stuff too.
Mm.
Which so English classes can be like therapy. I mean, often they're like therapy, or we provide friendship for companionship through this time, and now I'm trying to transition into. Now I'm trying to call it coaching because that's what it actually kind of is. And I did get a health coaching certification. I spent a year getting a health coaching certification, and I worked as a health coach for a little while. So I bring that to my teaching. But yeah, so that's the process I'm in. I don't know how long that took me to say. Sorry.
No, that's great. Well, it's a perfect illustration of one of the core ideas behind the close the gap approach, which is you become the thing by doing the thing. Like if you want to become the kind of person that can become a health coach or become a foreign language teacher, play an instrument, any of those things, like you have to enter the arena and engage the field. Like you can't just sit in the stands and watch other people do it. And you can spend as much time as you want preparing, at the academy and reading all the books or attending all the lectures, watching all the YouTube videos or taking all the online courses. But until that knowledge collides with reality, you don't actually learn anything. Um, and that this idea that learning learning is how we achieve the things that we want to achieve, but learning is different than knowledge. Learning is what happens when knowledge collides with reality, and we have to iterate and improve um, as we continue to work toward closing the gap between where we are and where we want to be. Like that's what learning is. Learning is I guess intelligence would be. And this is coming from Dr. Todd Snyder's definition of intelligence. He's a child psychologist, and uh, he says that intelligence is a measure of your ability to get the things that you want in life, which I love because you know my wife and I for several years took care of people with um, the intellectual challenges in our home, people that were on the spectrum with autism, Asperger's, whatnot. And most people would say, "Oh, well, those people don't have the same level of intelligence as other people." It's like actually, those folks really knew how to get what they wanted. They were amongst the most intelligent. I mean, they certainly had my number. They were able to get what they wanted from me. Um, and so it's we usually associate intelligence with things like certification and degrees and so forth. And while that might be a measure of your smartness or your ability to accumulate and recite back knowledge, it doesn't become intelligence until you can engage the field and apply it to your situation to get closer to what you want in life. So I love that aspect of your share. And it sounds like you already have a lot of practice in um, finding your way and getting what you want in life because you've already done it several times. Um,
I'm, I'm
so
working at it. It's a work in progress.
Well, I love that. Just wanted to say hi to Bob is here and Ryan Rion is here. Um, yeah, talent and intelligence is not the same as credentials. I would agree with that. I think credentials are often a little overrated and sometimes like I think it's great. I'm not making a judgment against credentials. I think my wife is a certified health coach. It sounds like you got a certification in health coaching, and that can be a fine way to go about learning a skill and helping connect that skill with people that are looking for that. Um, but like I have no coaching credentials, and I've had a successful coaching practice for almost a decade at this point. So all to say, like play your game and do your thing, but uh, oftentimes credentials can become I think a crutch sometimes. I remember when the pandemic first started, and I was at Akimbo as a head coach and had a lot of experience doing online community facilitation and creation and so forth. And I was getting calls from organizations saying, "Hey, we need help with creating our online work community." And I would say, "Oh, cool. Well, I can help you with that. Like, here's what it would look like. Here's what it would cost." And the next question would be, "Well, we need to get your credentials." And I'd say, "My credentials are you asked me to come in and help you because I have been doing this for some time and you need help. If you're looking for a set of credentials that you can hire me for so that you have deniability, like, hey, we hired a guy with credentials and it didn't work, it's not our fault." It's like, no, I don't have credentials. I have a track record of helping people do this. And if you're ready to do the work, then submit your payment credentials and let's go. Otherwise, go find someone with credentials that you can ignore and then blame them for when it doesn't work. And so, just you
It's
know, I think it's a permission thing,
the
right? Like some people feel like they don't have permission to do the thing until they have uh, some letters after their name. And again, I'm not discrediting the value of credentials. Like I want my doctor to have an MD,
right.
but at the same time, I don't need the person teaching me how to speak Spanish to have a degree or a certification from a school. Um, I want my engineers to be educated. I
Totally.
don't need every single person I learn any particular skill from to have that same level of qualification.
Totally. And the word that's coming to my mind is the phrase street cred, which we always, I feel like this people are probably, maybe they don't say that anymore, but street cred, it comes from credentials, right? And then there's certain credentials like, oh, he has street cred. Then there's certain credentials we don't ask for, like, for example, foreign language teachers don't have to have learned a second language. There's most native most teachers of English as a second language don't speak a second language. That credential is not required because they're speaking English. They're speaking English, so they don't know what it's like to be in their students' shoes. In that but that credential is not required because we made the rules. English native English speakers made the rules, and we put ourselves at the top. So, and that's another one of my things. So often the things that yeah, I have a thing with credential. Yeah, so that's a whole other. But
Well,
thank you for bringing
there
it
are
up.
some things, yeah, there are some things that, I when I again, as a huge fan and practitioner of jazz, uh, jazz guitar and jazz music and a lover of jazz music, like, um, with maybe two exceptions, none of the my favorite jazz artists went to school to learn how to play jazz. In fact, I would say that the worst teachers I've ever had are ones that relied on their school credentials to validate their ability to teach, and all they did was teach me the same stuff that they were taught in the same from the same books in the same order, and it really slowed down my progress. The best teachers I ever had no credentials, and they would just say, "Oh, you want to learn this song? Let's learn this song, and I'll teach you what you need to know about the theory as we go." Um, so yeah, yeah.
Mm.
So we are actually coming close to the. I don't know if I'm going to see you on the next call, but you know that I have a call at 1 o'clock. Um, just a shout out to Allison who says, "Back where I come from, we had universities, seats of great learning, where men go to become great thinkers, and then we come when they come out, they think deep thoughts and with no more brain than than you have, but they have one thing that you haven't got, a diploma." Yeah, that's from The Wizard of Oz. Okay, so Allison is, quoting one of my favorite movies, and, yeah, okay, from The Scarecrow, great. Uh,
Mm.
oh, my favorite guitarist, Ryan is asking. I guess I can't I mean, there's too many to put just 1 or 2 at the top, but, um, I would say that, Django Reinhardt probably was the biggest influence on me and my playing, for sure, for sure. Um, but I had a lot of other favorites along the way. So Molly, folks can find out more about you and connect with you through
Creating out loud on
Creating Out
Substack.
Loud here on Substack. Yeah, and of course, for those of you that are interested in uh, facilitating or catalyzing your journey as a successful solopreneur that is building and optimizing a business that funds and fits your ideal lifestyle, check me out at the Solopreneur Success Stack, and appreciate everyone that tuned in. Molly, really appreciate you raising your hand and being brave enough to get on this call and keep me out of trouble for about 45 minutes. I know that my wife and grandson both appreciate the fact that I was not able to get into any unnecessary trouble during this time. And yeah, we'll do this again and hopefully see you on another call inside the community really soon.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you. Thank you.